So, hello there, and welcome to the Breaking Bias Summit. And today I am so delighted to welcome one of my dearest friends, Qinza Najm, to the summit. Qinza, thank you so much for being here with us. And for those of you who may not know Qinza, first of all, she's incredible and amazing, has lived 25 different lives, all of which we may just scratch the surface on. But she's a Pakistani American artist whose work spans painting, installation, sculpture, and performance. Kinza's art has been showcased globally, including at the Queen's Museum, Christie's Art Basel, and the Museum of Moving Images. She's also a psychologist, in addition to practicing art in a way that delves into ideas of identity, power, the immigrant experience, and particularly focuses on the role of women and the experiences of women. So a lot of themes around breaking bias, and ever since I met her almost 8 years ago, her work and her art has really inspired my own journey of breaking bias and thinking about how do we move into a world where belonging replaces bias. So thank you again, Kinza, for being here. Um, and what I want to do now is like I've been beginning a lot of these conversations that a lot of the people that are visiting us at the summit have such incredible pedigrees and such rich resumes. But how would you introduce yourself?
First of all, thank you so much, Anu, and for this honor. And I'm so excited, and I feel like we both inspire each other. I get inspired by Anu all the time, and the book is coming out, which is I believe, is going to change the world. His writings are going to be everywhere. I'm going to love it,
You
and
were the first person to find out when I got the book deal, if you
I
remember.
am so honored, and I am so excited for you and intertwining of our journeys and
Yes.
even the overlaps between our conversations, our
Yeah.
practices, our way of viewing the world. So thank you for
Of
this
course.
platform, and thank you for doing the work that you are doing. I know I also wanna take a moment and say that. And in terms of the question, who am I outside of the little bio that you read?
Yeah.
I think if I think about myself, aside from all the layers of a woman and artist and all of that, I feel like the crux would be kindness and
Mm,
coming from the lens of um, I think compassion and I think that is for me is a crux to many things, like
yeah.
being kind and being compassionate. In essence, I feel like in a lot of times when I am stressed out or I'm frustrated and I'm like, oh my God, like in traffic and in like
Yeah.
sitting and like somebody, goes past or like bumps into you or curses you, you need to use that space or
Yeah.
that headspace to deal with that any kind
Yeah.
of, you know so or any kind of thing
Yeah.
that you don't feel comfortable with. So yeah, I think those would be two good words, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many intersectionalities across our own work, seemingly you're a woman, I'm a man, you're straight, I'm gay, Pakistani origin, I'm Indian origin, you're a Muslim, Sufi, I'm Hindu, Buddhist. Like there's so many things that people think that would make us like polar opposites. And
Yeah.
yet I find that you're more of a kindred spirit to me than so many other people that would share my identity, so to speak. And I'm sure it's the same for you. So as we think about kindness and compassion, when you look at our world right now, how do you feel? Not think, but how do you feel about bias in our society today? And feel free to
Well,
share any experiences, identities, somatic experiences that come up for you.
I think currently where we are at with everything that is happening in the world, like politically and like all the stuff we are reading in the newspaper to what is going on even in where we are living in our surrounding, the immediate thing that comes to me is like this tightness, you feel
Mm,
massive tightness of the body
yeah,
and you feel like you can't move in a way.
yeah,
The energy is stuck.
Yeah.
And then in my opinion, I think every time I do feel that, I want to do the opposite. I want to
Yeah.
be able to just get up, move, and have a flow in energy. How do you
Yeah.
create that flow of energy from being stuck for it to move? That movement is very
Yes.
interesting. Um, from physical to mental to emotional to spiritual to um, even in different mindsets, the
Yeah.
movement from this way of looking at the world from a place
Yeah.
of tightness and biases and judgment to a
Yeah.
place of openness and movement and acceptance and compassion, right?
Mm,
But there has to be a movement to have that shift.
yeah. So what you're really describing is like it feels so stagnant, right? Bias is like so limiting. It's just so tense and constricting. And then if I kind of flip that, how would you feel in a world without bias? You're an artist, you imagine, you think, you know, what does what comes up for you? What visions or images come up for you as you think about a world without bias, where belonging replaces bias?
I think it would connect to what I was also saying, this whole feeling of free flowingness, this movement,
Mm,
this like a moment of exhale
yeah, relief, freedom.
to just, yes, a breath. When you hold the breath, it's a different feeling. When you
Yeah,
exhale, it's a very different feeling, right?
yeah,
It's it. Uh, I think that world would be so beautiful when you imagine it, right? Like when you
yeah,
have that, it's acceptance and it's lack
yeah,
of judgment. Every time you feel that judgment and those biases, your whole body, mind creates this anxiety,
yeah, yeah,
and you can feel it from your whole, like different people hold anxiety in different parts of their body. So I
yeah,
feel it in my, like many people, I think, in my shoulders and in my stomach, I think.
yeah, that's right. Could you share a moment from your life where you felt like you belonged?
um, there are many moments where I feel that my art practice is right now currently creating a whole dialogue about this notion of belonging and what is home.
Mm,
As you know, the show at the Bronx Museum is exactly exploring these questions or investigating these questions of what is home, what is belonging. And if I take my art practice in context and answer that question from that lens,
yeah,
it would be um, asking questions from all these different immigrants in New York, asking them what is home and what is belonging, and all their answers, because obviously we know New York communities are, uh, America is obviously one of the biggest example of all these different immigrants, and you have
yeah,
to find the word home and belonging for each one of them in their own way.
yeah,
And it's just so impressive that all these people who moved or migrated for different reasons, from asylum to by force or from a war zone to uh, education by force,
yeah.
by free will, they all question that, and there is so much resilience in their answer. Like there is this
Mm,
resilience that I'm going to do it, that belongingness
yeah,
coming from that place of, you can't break my spirit.
yeah,
No matter what happens to me, I'm here, and I'm gonna, and I think that belongingness is connected with communities and acceptance and compassion, where you feel heard
I
and
agree.
seen, I think, for me at
Yeah,
least. And that was what was coming up a lot in those interviews with people.
yeah. As you share these interviews and uplift all of these voices of, immigrants from all different parts of the world, um, I'm also struck by your own story, because you yourself have been an immigrant. And yeah, I'd love you to reflect on your own story and why is breaking bias important to you? How did you come to this work of breaking bias? What does it
Mhm.
mean to you?
No, that's a very good question. I think it's a very loaded question. And I think
Yeah.
we would be sitting here unpacking it for a long time.
Yes.
So it's such a question, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a big and a beautiful and important question for
Yeah.
each one of us to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Being born in Pakistan, being raised in a family that my mother was really strict Pakistani, amazingly strong and beautiful female, but very extremely coming from a place of a religious lens,
Yeah.
Uh, and my father, very emancipated, went to British school, and from a very Western perspective was his upbringing. So when I was brought up in upbringing in Pakistan, it was in a Muslim culture, in a Muslim
Yeah.
society, where some of the stereotypes about different people, it's very dangerous to make the generalization. But in Muslim culture, there is that repression. I mean, there is truth
Sure.
to that, right? So sometimes I felt there was no place to raise your voice or to have your opinion or to even have to speak up your thoughts, because you have to abide with the norms of the society. So
Particularly
that,
as a woman, right?
particularly as a woman, and particularly as a very bold, direct woman, you know how you
As
and
a
I.
tomboy, as you were, as a young girl.
So I was a young girl who was always troublemaker, always in Urdu we say shararti bacha, like a naughty
Yeah.
kid. Like always, every time my parents would get a phone call from the principal that your kid is again like, and they knew which kid. We
Yeah.
had three, two brothers
It's
and
the
one
girl.
girl. It's always a girl, and the two boys are really like calm, cool, collected.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there was this streak of, I don't know if a rebellion is a good word, but this streak of like doing your own thing, regardless of how much the society is trying to like snub you down or. Um, but growing up, it was very challenging to just fit in the mold the way the society and your culture wants you to be, like subdued, quiet, kind of. Yes, my father really, really empowered me. Yes, I think
Yeah.
that really like helped me have that inner strength. But a lot of the times, growing up in that culture, fighting all these different norms, from what you have, being told what you have to wear, not wear. If you wear
Yeah.
this, you're a slut. If you wear this, you are this pious woman. So
Yeah.
always navigating these basic things was obviously, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to.
Yeah. They're so superficial too, right? Because just as
Right?
the way we adorn our body creates so much meaning for the rules of our society, but that says nothing about our character, nothing about, you know, the type of a person we are, how ethical or prudent we are. So how did you navigate some of these challenges, these external expectations that you were constantly met with, particularly navigate them in your own head? What are some tools that you've used or resources you've used to battle the social expectations placed upon you in a Muslim society, whether it's in Pakistan or being in the immigrant society, Muslim communities here in the United States
Yeah.
and the UK and Dubai and all the other
Right.
places you've lived in?
Yeah, and I moved, just to piggyback a little bit. So I moved
Yeah,
as a teenager back to the States, and I
yeah,
did my studies. I did my master's and my PhD from the States, and in psychology when I was getting trained as a psychologist. I think a lot of the tools were also coming from learning about myself. A lot of the stuff I didn't even know what was happening, and that lack of awareness was creating. But then when you get
yeah,
some awareness in who you are and
yeah,
getting to know and meeting yourself, hey Kinza, nice to meet you finally at like 21, like hello,
yeah,
this is who you are, aside from somebody's daughter or somebody's mother or sister,
yeah,
or like just know you as a person. And then so I think self-awareness, getting to know yourself, um, and then I think coming from a lens of compassion and not judging yourself, I think
yeah,
that process of unlearning is very critical. I
yeah,
think as a mechanism to having those tools, like
yeah,
those tools come from internal place and also external place, right? So
Yeah,
finding communities that are like-minded, that accept you, love you, like a connection with you, Anu. That has
sure.
been, like since we met. But so I think there are internal resources and then there are external resources. But I think
Yeah,
both of them have to work together to kind of help you push. And I'm still working with that. I
yeah.
don't like
I
breaking a
mean,
lot of those still.
I just think that you're being so humble because I've known you for a while and I've just been so in awe of you because, when Kinza shares that she moved here as a teenager, she moved here as a teenager after she had an arranged marriage, as a
Yes.
teenager. So she moved to a country where she didn't know the culture, she didn't speak the language very well, but you literally had to start your life from scratch with someone who was practically a stranger. But then have enough self-worth and confidence to not only like put yourself through college and other things, but get a master's and a PhD, on top of doing all the other things that came your way out of social expectations, which is so bold, right? And then eventually taking the bold step of leaving that marriage, right? Which is such a no-no in South Asian culture, in Pakistani culture. um, so yeah, there's something that drove you to kind of start having that compassion, not only for others, which you do, certainly your work speaks to it, but also for yourself. Where does
No,
that come from?
that you're absolutely right. Thanks for adding the context in terms of my ex, my family, my friends. Like, why would you get a PhD with a very high GPA and
Yeah,
then move
leave
to
all of that and become an artist. Like, it's like,
starving
okay,
artist?
I'm a psychologist, I'm a professor. I think you were a professor at Georgia State University or Emory
Yes,
University or both.
yes,
And then you left that to become an artist in New
and
York
that
City.
move took a lot. I know,
Yes.
very honest, and it has been a very challenging and yet very satisfying journey since I made that full shift. So I decided,
Yeah.
when I moved here, I finished the master's, I finished the PhD, practiced it, and I always wanted to be a full-time artist. But my mother was like, "Nope, the college
Yeah.
is one of the best universities in Pakistan called NCA, the National College of Arts." She was
Yeah.
like, women do the
They smoke and hash and do marijuana. And
they have boyfriends, and then they're troublemaking. They become troubled females, and that's not the route I want you to take, right?
wow.
So she was very protective because also my father passed away when he was 39, and so was she. She was really young, so she was. I
Mm.
can understand her perspective, but yes. So there was this. It felt at that age that your dreams are shattered. So when I did move here, I decided that even if I do become a doctor, which is very stereotypical of Desis, right, and engineer.
Indeed.
So,
Indeed.
so yeah, so
And
I became that, but then it took a lot out of me to make that switch, because it was very scary and there was a lot of
yeah,
uncertainty. I didn't even know if I was good enough as an artist. Like
yeah,
you, I studied psychology. I consider
yeah.
myself somewhat of an outsider. Uh,
And you had a private practice. You had patients. You
that's
saw
right.
people, right, on a weekly
That's
basis. And
right. Yes.
and the way I define bias is, bias is a learned habit that distorts how we perceive, reason, remember, and make decisions.
Mhm.
Um, and I think you're describing that process of learning, this learned habit. And of course, there are identities like our sex, our gender, our ethnicity, our religion. But I think that one of the really important identities in our lives is our professional identities. And you had to break that bias
Yes.
of like needing to be an artist versus a psychologist.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I'd love for you to share with us like your moment of obligation around this particular identity, or moments of obligation where like, I gotta go. I just have to be an artist. I need a canvas. I need to start painting and put this gift that I have into practice. When did that happen? When did you know it?
Um, you have, I'm sure many of us can relate. You have this itch sometimes, right? That
Yeah,
a lot of stuff is going, yes, but there has to be something more. And that itch becomes from a very small, tiny irritation to something you're like constantly like. So that was happening with me. I had this itch that there has to be something more. Yes, I finished my PhD. Yes, I have that, but there has to be something more. And I think as a doctor, as a professor who was asked to be more on a tenure track, I somewhat, this is me, I'm taking the ownership, I'm sure not everybody feels like that. I felt still contrived that I have to have, every time I would go back to Pakistan, or every time I would be introduced as a psychologist, like as a PhD doctor, there was this pressure to be a certain way. So it reminded me of the pressure when I was a kid to still fit a norm in a way.
Yeah, to be a certain kind of a girl.
To be a certain kind of a good girl. Yes.
Yeah, good girl.
And, good girl. And that good girl, there's a lot in there, right? So I think the itch was there since I was 3 years old. I remember my parents used to fight a lot because my father was an alcoholic and my mother didn't accept his alcoholism because she was very religious. So there was this constant clash between them. All my childhood, I remember that. So I was 3 years old. I still remember they had a massive fight. And that's maybe one of the initial memories. And then I was so upset. And I just went outside. I had my crayons and I would draw in my very like basic, like childlike, the drawings on the neighbors' outside walls. And I was always in trouble because, like obviously they would come and say, your kid is like drawing stuff on our walls and that's not good. So I feel like they kind of paint your lens, right? Those early experiences. So sorry, I lost the question you were asking me. I was
that's the beginning of the moment of culmination, and part of it is like it seems that whenever you had that itch, you didn't ignore the itch. You brought that to awareness. You were mindful of the itch. And the itch just kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger until you couldn't stop itching.
It's almost like a rash. And you're like,
it was a rash.
I have to fully express myself. And in some ways, that expressiveness of being able to draw on my neighbor's walls gave some that I can express. And then I was even 5-year-old and I was still in trouble, still would create it, but now I was better with drawing. I was becoming much better. So I would almost tell the whole narrative with the drawing. So I was kind of telling the house story in a drawing. And there was a lot of shame, like, how dare you kind of share the narrative on the wall? Almost like a child graffiti in a way, right? And but that itch became much bigger and I had to do something about it. And for me, Anu, if I can be very honest, the biggest fear, the biggest emotion that a lot of us carry within ourselves as a psychologist, I'm also would notice with myself, with my clients when I was practicing, is fear. So there was this fear that stopped me from making the shift was that what if I fail? So when I finished the PhD, I was teaching as a faculty. I taught at Emory. I taught at, like you mentioned, Georgia State. I also taught in Pakistan. So after teaching for a bit, I was constantly still making, and I was like, one day I sat and I had that itch still going on. It was becoming bigger and bigger. And one day it really hit me that, I maybe can I cannot deal with regret. For me, it was harder to deal with regret that if I don't do this now, then I'm going to be much later look back and say I didn't have the courage to live my authentic life, to be in the moment where I took risk, I failed, but yet I was able to break that biases within my own head and at least took the faith.
That's so powerful. And, this is where I think, like for me, this is the magic of, or the miracle of contemplative tools. And, one of the things, I share this with you. So in college, I went back to India for the first time since my family immigrated here, but to study Urdu. I studied Urdu and Islamic studies, and just kind of found a spiritual home, because like my root traditions, it's the same things.
Yes.
Love, compassion, forgiveness, understanding,
Absolutely.
And one of the things that has stuck with me to this day is the Shahada, right? La ilaha illallah, or there's no God but one God, or there's no love but one love. There's no hope but one hope. It's whatever name you want to put to this external force, and this is what I find in the Buddhist tradition. When we talk about mindfulness, we're really talking about this idea that connects us all, life, within and without. So I feel that as you share about this journey, and also how this itch became a rash, and itches are difficult, rashes are even more difficult. We need some sort of inner medicine to move through the discomfort. And I know that you have a storehouse of, resources. So could you share ways, spiritual practices or contemplative practices have supported you in breaking these biases within your mind, and in your life? And how have you cultivated these practices?
Yeah, I think you just said the shahada, and you did it in such a beautiful, articulate way, even better than I would have said it. And I think even when I was growing up, I'll still go back and I'll reconnect it, because a lot of your worldview and the way you see things comes from your lens as a kid, how you were attached with your caregiver, and a lot of this comes from there, right? So I remember one thing both my parents, as much as they had the clash between them, they loved was Sufi music. So I remember, even though I was drawing those drawings, but I had some great memories as a kid, sitting in my dad's lap and listening to the Sufi qawwalis,
like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and
Ali Khan. I mean, there are so many. All the
Abida Parveen.
And I think I was always told I'm more like my dad. So my dad was not religious at all, and he was very spiritual. So I think that listening to those qawwalis, and you have listened to the qawwalis, how the music goes up and then it builds, and then you almost go in a trance.
Yeah, it's like a state of samadhi, right?
Yes, 100%. The contemporary, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I remember, even when I was as young as 5 or 6 years old, I was exposed as young as very, very young.
Yeah.
But and then when I switched to being a full-time artist, I would be in my studio listening to qawwalis and listening to jazz.
Yeah.
So those were the two things I would listen to. And I think that helped me have these inner and outer conversation with the higher power, and just letting go of control. Because I think I can be very controlling, and I have this control freaky person inside of me. So I think for me, the tools are accepting your own self with your darker sides, with your beautiful sides, like integrating them all.
Yeah.
And accepting them somehow, or making room for those darker emotions and not rejecting them. And in those moments when I was by myself, long periods of time in my studio, I felt like there was this acceptance and love, and through the connection through the music, the qawwalis, jazz, and that helped me. And I grew up very spiritual and religious household, right? So it was, I think that spiritual, I think that word is overused in our contemporary world. But when when you feel it, right? Like when you feel not convince anybody to feel that feelings. I mean, you feel it, you meditate a lot. And I'm not even trying to meditate, because that's also overly used, right? Like, but there is this place where you go and everything becomes quiet, and you're just one with yourself, and nothing matters. And then it just puts things in perspective for you, at least. So I think the practices are also some of the rituals that are very helpful. And in that, meditations, what you and I
Yeah.
have done together so many times, right?
Yes, yes, indeed.
And being aware and being present helps me.
Yeah.
I noticed in my tool that either I was carrying a lot of anxiety and was living in the future all the time.
Mm,
Clients sometimes did, or living in the past and thinking about some regrets, or like, and that would make you feel depressed sometimes. But living in the present helps you have focus and presence, and like capacity to feel your body,
yeah.
feel yourself, and that
Yeah.
helps you, I think, or
I
help
think
me.
it's yeah, and that's basically, in the book I talk about the 5 tools that are helpful in breaking biases called the Prism Toolkit. And it begins with the M, mindfulness, being present, being aware of what's happening in the now. And then once we're aware of it, to really shift that perspective, stereotype replacement, to actually go toward, listening to jazz or qawwalis or some other music out of awareness that, oh, this is going to uplift my mood, or it's going to help me feel connected at a time where I feel lonely.
Hmm.
And music in this way has such a powerful,
Oh my God.
um, you know, yeah, miracle cure in addressing some of these
I
challenges.
think for me, music, and when you and I hang out, for example, I mean, I have a pretty amazing, I feel very blessed, like yourself also.
Yeah.
We both have really amazing community of friends and capacity
Mhm.
to laugh together. Like
Yeah.
you and I laugh like crazy, like we go to Soho House and we are like having a great night. And
Yeah.
so I think obviously like music and community and acceptance, but laughter. I sometimes feel like laughter is such a not
Yeah.
enough talked about, like how it can be amazing.
It totally is. This past weekend I hung out with my younger nieces, and they're young, they're 10 and 12, and sometimes they get really like what's self-righteous with each other about how things ought to be. So I was like, okay, we're gonna go outside and we're gonna hold each other's hand and we're gonna do laughter yoga. And they were like so resistant to it because laughter is like a pro-social behavior. It helps us be more social with one another.
Yeah,
One of the 5 tools. And I just started laughing. And they were like, "You sound like a witch. What are you doing?" They were just so judgmental, but I just didn't like I could feel like it was like belly laughter.
yeah, yeah,
And eventually they joined in. And then for the next like 5 minutes, we were just like laughing
yeah,
for the sake of laughing, for
yeah,
the joy of laughing, for the
yeah.
delight of laughing.
Yes.
And suddenly all 3 of us were in our bodies. So
Mhm.
then they could talk with each other, they could resolve their conflicts, give each other a hug,
Right.
and once again be mindful of what mattered, which is for the 2 of them that they are best friends.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God willing, that'll be so.
And I feel like the humor or capacity to see things from another way is
Yeah,
so interesting, right? It brings.
yeah,
I love the artists who use humor in their work. I don't like. I don't
yeah.
know how to, but I really enjoy it when I go to some exhibitions and they punch you with something really important, but it is so funny, and then it helps
um,
you kind of like deconstruct it and go deeper into it, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think humor is a beautiful thing.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So what are you working on now? Like, where is your art evolving? You
So
know?
we didn't talk about any of the projects. Hopefully, the audience can go on my Instagram and they can check it.
Yeah.
Um, but like I said before, I am working on the belonging and what is home. So I have this it is a Pakistani. It's just a smaller
Oh,
version of like, yeah, and
yeah.
it says the word exile on it. I don't know if you can read it, and it has
Yeah,
a
I can
small
read it.
Urdu
Yeah.
text in white, so you can see the
Okay.
small Urdu text on it here. The
Yeah.
poetry, yeah, you can see the Urdu and English word exile. So I am. These are South Asian metal suitcases called peti, Peyti in India,
Okay.
Pakistan. So it's used obviously many times for traveling, In old times, even now, I mean, the peti is a trunk is a metaphor for kind of packing your bag and going somewhere locally or like internationally. But for me, I became really interested in it. First, it's so cultural, and the metal trunk is just loaded with so many different things. And I was also thinking a lot about body as a peti or as a trunk in which we have our
Yeah.
soul, we have our memories, and what are
Yeah.
we packing and unpacking, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes heavy. It becomes full of baggage. You're talking about what's happening in the world, and then
Yeah.
how do you find those tools or mechanisms to unpack some of those,
Unpack, unload,
unload, right?
release. Yeah.
Yes, and then put good stuff in it, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are the good things that you can put in it? So I
Yeah.
started interviewing, like I mentioned before, and this is what I'm working on, continuing on to work on, using the same metal as the petis and deconstructing the peti or the trunk, to talk about these interesting kind of conversations which are happening all around the world. There are people in different third world countries and war zones where they want to move into another space to talk about memories and belonging. So I'm asking these individuals from New York and from different parts of the world, if they were to move by force or by choice and they have small limited space, like what are we allowed, 7 kg and then 22 kg, and
Yeah.
that's the whole world sometimes in it. You have to pack, you have to be very
Yeah.
mindful of what to
Yeah.
pack in those 22 kg, or if you just have hand luggage 7 or 10 kg, what is one or two objects that reminds you of home and belonging? So I've been
Yeah.
collecting those objects, and inside this are a lot of the objects that people talked about, like, I don't know if you can see
Wow.
they are.
Yeah.
So for some people it's the photographs, for some people it's this, for one girl, and all these interviews they name the objects, for this is
Mm.
for her to feel protected. So if she ever leaves home and is not able to go back to her house for longer periods of time, she would like not forget this. And for so a lot of people it's food actually
Yeah.
reminds them of home.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, this is an ongoing project in which I'm collecting objects of belonging and memories, and their sound pieces. And I have uh, artist residency coming up in Mexico City, so I'm gonna continue on this conversation using
Yeah.
metal and some soft materials to talk about these themes. And yeah, I'm very excited what comes out of that residency, what's going to inspire me in Mexico City to use some of their local materials.
That's incredible. And I feel like, you know, whoever's listening and watching our conversation, I want to invite you all to, of course, follow your work, but also be in conversation with you around these important projects. Because what I've learned from you is, art can be such a healing practice because it provides us with a different language to talk about some of these topics that are playful and creative and different. Like instead of using words, you're using objects like
Right.
photographs and food within this
Mm-hmm.
trunk, this peti, and that already the symbolism of that is so profound because I get it. People
Right.
get it. But we don't need to use words, but it allows us to have an emotional experience,
Yes.
which helps us get out of our heads into our
Right.
bodies and into our hearts, which is the goal of breaking bias, so we could be whole human beings.
No, absolutely. And I think what you are and what you're talking about through art, through all of this is under creative lens. This is creating a
Yeah,
dialogue. Either it's with yourself or with the community. The work is creating a dialogue. And
yeah,
in my opinion, you were talking about tools. After the self-awareness also comes the dialogue. Like that's how you break biases. You mentioned
yeah,
you're Indian, I'm Muslim, you are male and female. But the reason you and I and me and so many other different people from different parts of the world and culture and heritage, and same goes for you and your community,
yeah,
we love and respect each other because we have a dialogue, and we look past those
Yeah.
you don't see just a Muslim woman, you see as a
Yeah.
whole a
Yeah.
complete person,
Spectrum.
right?
And like what we're rooted in is that, yes, we have these, what I call secondary identities, but that's not what we focus on. We focus on our primary identities as, we're both human beings who
Yes.
care about compassion and love and kindness and care.
Right.
And that's what really connects us. And the beautiful thing is, these human beings you and I, but also our communities, we all share these primary values, but we're manifested with
Right.
all these beautiful differences. Um, and that's kind of our work to really grow and understand and strengthen
Yes.
those skills of kindness and compassion,
No,
uh,
absolutely. And listen to
and
each other.
listen.
When
Mm,
you listen, I feel like a lot of times when we have differences, you put them in a box, and then it's easy for you to monsterize somebody when you don't see
yeah,
their full self and there's no dialogue. It's easy to make
yeah,
people a monster, right? But when you have a
yeah,
dialogue, you see that there are a lot of overlaps between the two of you, and you can
yeah,
actually have common grounding to, take it further or have a dialogue or not.
yeah.
So I agree with you.
Oh, well, it's been such a treat and a delight to have you here, Kinza. And I'm really, really, really excited to see what comes out of your art practice in the coming months and years. Of course, we'll be in conversation about it. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audiences before we close today?
This has been a pleasure, and I think this is such important work that I know your book is doing, and you are bringing all these people into this conversation, and it's so critical, and especially now. It's
Yeah,
always critical, but especially now, what's
yeah,
happening. So I want to just take a moment and say thank you for doing the work that you're also doing,
thank
and
you.
very proud of you.
Mm,
You're just like this is just the beginning, right? And I'm also very excited to see where our journeys take us, and also I think for people to give something that they don't like or completely disagree a chance, and to see a more whole picture before judging it, right? That would
amen.
be something, a small ask for people to show an act of kindness than just jumping onto the judge.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Kinza. Thank you all for joining, and have a beautiful day ahead.
Thank you.